Imagine living your life in an idyllic community, a tight-knit group of people who share common values and beliefs, where life is peaceful and harmonious. But what if this seemingly perfect community hid dark secrets beneath its surface? Today we're going to talk about some of the most notorious cults in history and reveal the chilling truths behind their existence. Cults have existed for centuries, often shrouded in secrecy and operating on the fringes of society. They can be difficult to define, but are generally characterized by a charismatic leader, a small group of devoted followers, and a set of beliefs or practices that are often considered extreme or bizarre. Some of these groups have gained notoriety for their harmful and dangerous activities, leaving a lasting impact on those who have been involved with them. From the Manson family to the People's Temple, let us take a deep dive into the world of cults and explore the dark secrets behind America's most infamous cult leaders and their followers. Heaven's Gate, the UFO cult that believed in reincarnation and alien overlord. Heaven's Gate was a UFO cult founded by Marshall Applewhite and Bonnie Nettles in the early 19th. Their beliefs were centered around the idea that the Earth was being closely monitored by extraterrestrials, who would soon return to take humans to a higher level of existence. According to their teachings, there were multiple levels of beings, with the most advanced being the aliens known as the The cult members believed that they had been chosen by the executors to be their human representatives, and that they must live a pure and disciplined life in order to prepare for their upcoming departure from Earth. In fact, the name Heaven's Gate itself was derived from the belief that there was a portal or gate located somewhere in space through which they could access a higher level of existence. The group's teachings also included a belief in reincarnation, which meant that members were expected to be reborn into different bodies over and over again, until they eventually reached a state of enlightenment. However, it was not just the promise of a better afterlife that drew people into the group. The cult's leaders used a combination of charisma, manipulation, and fear to control their followers and keep them loyal to the group. Members were encouraged to cut themselves off from their old lives and to devote themselves entirely to the cult and its mission. They lived in communes and followed strict rules and rituals designed to keep them in line. Despite the bizarre and controversial nature of their beliefs, the group managed to attract a number of high-profile members, including former child star and actress Rebecca Sheffer. But in the end, the group's plans for the future were never realized. In March 1997, 39 members of the cult took their own lives in a mass suicide, believing that they were being transported to a higher level of existence in a spaceship that was following the Hale-Bopp comet. Their deaths shocked the world and raised questions about the power of belief and the dangers of cult membership. The People's Temple, the poisoned Kool-Aid cult. The People's Temple was a cult founded by Jim Jones in the 1950s. It started as a small group of religious and social activists who shared Jones's vision of a utopian society free from racism and poverty. However, as the group grew in size and influence, Jones became increasingly autocratic and paranoid. He began to demand absolute obedience from his followers and punish those who tried to leave the group. Despite the warning signs, many people were drawn to the People's Temple. Jones was a charismatic leader who promised his followers a better life and a chance to escape the hardships of everyday living. He also attracted people from all walks of life and backgrounds, creating a sense of community and belonging for those who felt marginalized or outcast. But the dark side of the cult began to emerge in the 1970s when Jones's behavior became more erratic and violent. He began to use torture and murder to punish those who disobeyed him, and he also forced his followers to participate in bizarre and humiliating rituals. Despite the growing evidence of abuse and exploitation within the group, many of Jones's followers remained loyal to him until the very end. On November 18, 1978, more than 900 members of the People's Temple died in a mass suicide murder in Jonestown. They drank a cyanide-laced drink, which Jones had dubbed although some reports indicate that it was Kool-Aid that was served. Jonestown is now remembered as one of the most infamous events in cult history, and the story of the People's Temple serves as a warning about the dangers of blind obedience and the importance of speaking out against abuse and exploitation. The Manson family, the cult of personality and brutal crimes. Charles Manson was an American cult leader and criminal who was convicted of several murders, including the Tate LaBianca murders in 1969. Manson's followers, who became known as the Manson family, were a group of young people who were drawn to his charismatic personality and his promises of a better life. He taught them his own twisted philosophy, which blended elements of racism, apocalyptic beliefs, and a distorted view of American culture. Despite the disturbing nature of his teachings, many of Manson's followers were drawn to him, and they formed a tight-knit community that was based on loyalty and obedience to their leader. Manson's influence over his followers was absolute, and he demanded their complete obedience. He also encouraged them to engage in bizarre and sometimes violent activities, such as animal killings and sexual orgies. This ultimately culminated in a series of brutal murders in 1969. Manson's followers carried out a series of killings in Los Angeles, California, targeting wealthy landowners and celebrities. The victims were often chosen at random, and the attacks were characterized by their brutality and savagery. Manson himself did not participate directly in the killings, but he was convicted as an accomplice. The Manson family murders shocked the nation and led to a media frenzy. Manson was eventually caught and sentenced to death, although his sentence was later changed to life in prison. He died in 2017 at the age of 83. The Branch Davidians, the apocalyptic cult, and the deadly Waco siege. The Branch Davidians were a religious sect that emerged in the mid-20th century. They believed that the end of the world was near and that they were being persecuted by the government and law enforcement. The group's apocalyptic beliefs were a major factor in the deadly siege at Waco, Texas in 1993. The siege began on February 28, 1993, when federal agents raided the Branch Davidian compound near Waco, Texas. The raid was part of an investigation into illegal weapons possession, but it quickly turned violent. 4 members of the sect and 1 agent were killed in the initial raid, and a 51-day standoff ensued. The standoff ended tragically on April 19, 1993, when the compound caught fire and more than 80 Branch Davidians died. The fire was so intense that it melted some of the steel structures on the property and remained smoldered for weeks afterwards. While the exact cause of the fire is still unknown, many believe that it was deliberately set by the Branch Davidians themselves rather than having it caused by law enforcement. Shockingly, the FBI released tear gas canisters filled with a chemical agent called phenylacetic acid, which has hallucinogenic effects, into the compound in an attempt to flush out the remaining members of the group. It has been suggested that the release of this chemical weapon may have played a role in causing the fire. Following the tragedy, the Branch Davidians were heavily scrutinized by the media and the government. They were portrayed as a dangerous and apocalyptic cult, and their beliefs and practices were ridiculed and mocked. However, despite the negative attention, the Branch Davidians continue to exist today. Although their numbers have dwindled since the Waco siege, they remain committed to their apocalyptic beliefs and their desire to live a life separate from mainstream society. The Children of God, the sex cult founded by a teenager. The Children of God is a cult that was founded in 1968 by David Burke, when he was only 14 years old. According to Burke's teachings, God had chosen him to lead his own religious movement, and his followers believed that he was the reincarnation of Jesus Christ. The group's beliefs were a mix of Christianity, Hinduism, and New Age spirituality, and they attracted a diverse group of followers from around the world. But the Children of God is perhaps best known for its controversial practice of using sex as a tool for evangelism and manipulation. This practice, known as flirty fishing, involved members of the group using their sexuality to attract new recruits and manipulate them into joining the cult. The group also had a strict hierarchy, and members were expected to follow a strict code of conduct. Members were required to live communally, give up their possessions, and obey the group's leaders. They also practiced a form of confession in which members were required to share their most intimate thoughts and feelings with other group members. Despite the controversy surrounding the group, the Children of God continued to grow and spread its message throughout the 1970s and 1980s. They established communes around the world and attracted thousands of followers. However, as time went on, the group's practices became more extreme and its leaders became more authoritarian. In the 1990s, the Children of God began to be accused of child abuse and sexual exploitation, and many former members came forward with stories of abuse and exploitation. As a result, the group's reputation was tarnished, and it began to lose members. Today, the Children of God continues to exist, but it is much smaller and more secretive than it was in the past. These are just a few of the many cults that have existed in America. Each of these groups had its own unique set of beliefs and practices, but they all shared one thing in common: the ability to manipulate and control their followers in a way that allowed them to carry out their goals. If you enjoyed this video, please stay tuned for more content.